Hello, and welcome to another AB Countdown video right here on the flagship show, Double AD, old school here. So glad you could join us. Today we're going to be taking a look at my top 20 albums of all time. Want to rock out with me? Stay tuned to find out what takes the top spot on the second episode of AB's Playground right here on Atlantis After Dark. You know it. Welcome back, everybody. Strap in because we're not wasting a lot of time today. Make sure you're subscribed, and if you dig what you see here, give me a thumbs up and ring that bell. Give me a thumbs up, all that horse shit. You know what to do. As always, if you like my list or disagree with my choices, be sure to say something mean in the comments section below. It'll make you feel better, and it gives me something to ignore while I'm on the shitter. Hey, no, seriously, leave me your top 20 list. Tell me whatever you want. And if you want to discuss this in real time, check out my QR code on the screen to go to the link in the description below to visit my Discord server, Atlantis After Dark. We have a lot of fun over there, and there's a crew of folks who are just as well steeped in pop culture as the rest of us are. And I would love it if you stopped in and said hello. With that, the criteria for ranking my albums really came down to a combination of things. One thing they all have in common is I could probably recite every lyric on each of these records from memory, and I can play quite a few of these songs on these albums on the old guitar, which was my weapon of choice back in the old days. And the funny thing is, I originally wanted to do just a top 10 list, but there were so many honorable mentions that I figured I would just rank twice as many, so I could be a little more fair to everything, because look, I love music of all shapes and flavors, man. This is who I am. It's part of my DNA. It makes up who I am. And to that point, I really think that some of these records might surprise you. Some of them might cross genres you might not think I'm familiar with. And this was something I really labored over, going through my music collection, my CDs, my LPs, all my MP3s, and all of those other alphanumeric letters you can think of. This is probably the most comprehensive list I've ever created, and I categorized them by how often do I listen to or did I listen to the record, how well do I know the songs, and what's my emotional reaction when I hear these records or when I hear a song from one of these records. Also, I tried making it a point not to include more than one album by a band, or else this list might get pretty boring pretty quick. Not that everything would be Kiss or Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath, but I think this showcases my diversity in musical tastes more than anything else as well. And luckily, I have like 100 records tied for first place in my head, so while this list was hard to put together, I was spoiled for choice. Other factors might seep in here and there. We can talk about those when we get there, but for now, I think you get the gist. Also, I'm going to be trying to be far more succinct when I talk about these records on this video as opposed to the last one I did, and I hope this video isn't over an hour long, but I fear it might be close. So just a heads up, I want to say a real quick thank you to everyone who loves and comments on my videos. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. And even though I make you watch these long ass videos, for what it's worth, there's no advertisements on my channel, ever. So go ahead and suck it, other YouTube creators. Plus, I like to think that people can watch this on their TV or a tablet while they go about their daily chores, or maybe you have it up in the background while you're doing something else, I don't know. But you guys, the ones who are watching my videos in their entirety, you guys are the teetotal shit, and there's a little surprise for you at the end of this thing. Alright, enough bad comedy. For now, let's quit wasting time and get right into it. Starting at number 20 and going all the way to number 1, who's it gonna be? Coming in at number 20, it's Garth Brooks, No Fences. Surprised? Not me, I love Garth Brooks. Out of all the pop country megastars that were born in that era, he was by far the best, although I do love me some Alan Jackson as well. It might surprise you to learn that there's some more heavy material on this record than you might think. The Thunder Rolls is an epic and dark song, but there are other songs on here that deal with adult subject matter that anyone can relate to. Unanswered Prayers is a fantastic song, and I love Mr. Blue. I just love this record. when I want to feel the gambit of emotions, I usually play this record because it always takes me there. And I have to credit a friend of mine who used to work in a grocery store with me who turned me onto this record. She was big into country music at the time when its popularity was just starting to boom in the early 90s, and I admit some of her favorite records eventually wound up finding their way into my record collection, and this album was one of them. I think this was the very first one, actually. Whenever I listen to this record today, I think about her and how much fun we had working in that little podunk 6-aisle hometown grocery store. It was never work when we were on shift together, and I suppose that contributes to my love of this record. I mean, I've said it before, you know, Mr. Blue, Two of a Kind, Working on a Full House, Wild Horses. I can't say enough good things about this record. Friends in Low Places might be the ultimate country party anthem. Garth Brooks' No Fences just delivers on all fronts. Check it out, even if you're not a fan of country music. This is just an all-around good, wholesome, and yet still satisfying record. Next up, coming in at number 19, it's the Beastie Boys, License to Ill. I woke up late for school, man, I don't want to go. Speaking of party anthems, here's one that stands the test of time. Fight for Your Right is a pretty goddamn kick-ass party anthem. Just don't listen to that new Motley Crue version. It's such a giant llama ding-dong. But if you're only listening to that song on this record, you're really missing out on one of the most unique and influential records in the late 80s. In many ways, this was a game changer for the music industry at large. Here was a rock or a punk group that did hip-hop, and the funny thing is, they did all of it extremely well. They did it so well that they consistently crossed boundaries and made it into the mainstream with several hits, and while a lot of these records are good, this is the one I reach for the most. Hold It Now, Hit It, Brass Monkey, No Sleep Till Brooklyn, She's Crafty, Girls, and of course my favorite song on the record, Paul Revere. That bass just bumps. Funny story, back in the early 90s, I had a Dodge Daytona IROC Z with a tricked out stereo system. And me and my friend in the Navy, we used to cruise in Southern California all the time, and I had this sweet tricked out stereo system, because back then that was my priority, right? I didn't care about the way the engine ran, I just wanted loud fucking bass. Anyways, a friend of mine, we're sitting at a stoplight, and I had Paul Revere blasting about as loud as I could, and I wasn't paying attention to anything but the stoplight, because I just wanted to make my left turn. And it was so loud I didn't notice or hear this one dude standing next to the window, the passenger window. He's screaming at me to turn it down. And his lips were moving, but nothing came out. The bass was that damn loud. I had to turn him down to ask him what he was saying. Dude was screaming at the top of his lungs. Funny stuff. Great record, great times. I still love everything about this album. Every song is a banger. Check it out. If you're not into hip-hop, it doesn't matter. This is a great fucking record. Next up, in at number 18, it's Thriller by Michael Jackson. Another controversial pick? Not to me. This record is fantastic. I think at some point everyone in the world has probably heard this record, and if you don't like this album, why not? What did this album ever do to you? I mean, do I even need to go into the track listing on this record at all? I mean, it's pretty much there. It speaks for itself. Almost every song on this record was a huge hit, and this is the record that propelled Michael Jackson into becoming the biggest pop superstar of all time. There's a reason why they call him the King of Pop, kids. It's not a clever nickname. And it's not that I don't want to talk about this record, it's just there isn't anything I can say about it that hasn't already been done to death everywhere else. The best track on the record to me is The Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney. I really think it's sad what happened between the two of them. I guess what happened is Paul McCartney was looking to buy back the Beatles' music catalog, and he told Michael Jackson about his plans to do it so McCartney could get his music back. Well, Michael Jackson allegedly went behind Paul's back and bought the catalog out from underneath of him, and it caused a huge rift. And Jackson basically made a small fortune in Beatles royalties alone, never mind the payouts he got on his own material. So, yeah, it's a sad footnote of rock history, and it's even sadder that there was never a resolution between the two, as Jackson would pass away years later. Still, this is a badass record. It'll make you get up and move your ass. If you haven't heard it before, you really need to get out more. I can't add anything to this record that hasn't already been said. If you love it, great. If you don't, why not? Next record. In at number 17, it's Hank Williams' 3 Straight to Hell. Another country album? What's going on, AB? Yes, it is a country album, but it's a heavy country album. If you don't know Hank Williams 3, or if you're not familiar with his work, Hank 3 as he's often referred to, he is the son of Hank Williams Jr. and the grandson of Hank Williams. It's funny how that works out, huh? But if you're not if you're not familiar with, Hank's work, you should be. If you're gonna listen to it, Hank himself insists that you don't buy the official release from Curb Records. Go on and listen to the record on YouTube or get a bootleg copy. I'm sure if you ping me and ask me, or AB or somebody to that effect, he may or may not be able to help you with that. But don't go buying it off of Curb Records. I guess Curb Records really screwed him over. So, God, you gotta have a lot of hate to tell people not to buy your fucking music. Anyways, don't let this album's availability put you off. It starts off with like a slow, traditional country waltz cover of Satan is Real, before they bust hard into Straight as Hell, which is a ripping tune, as is Smoke and Wine, which never gets old to yours truly. They're all country songs, but they're slightly rockabilly. They have a slight rockabilly edge to them. And that's done in a way that's reminiscent of Ass Jack, which is Hank 3's punk rockabilly band, which, by the way, is another one of Hank 3's records you should check out if you're so inclined. Anyways, the rest of this record is an outlaw country music masterpiece. Dick and Dixie is outstanding, as is My Drinking Problem. Personal favorite of mine is Thrown Out of the Bar. Not Everybody Likes Us. I love Angel of Sin, the best track on the record. It's the last track on the record too, funny enough. Just beautiful stuff here. Check it out, and if you do, you might fall in love with it like I have. Great record, great artist, and great music all the way around. Next. In at number 16, it's the debut record by Body Count, aptly titled, well, Body Count. This was Ice-T's foray into what can only be described as thrash, or even a sprinkling of punk in here. But lyrically, this is a rap album that deals with some heavy shit, man. And it's somewhat infamous for having a controversial song removed from subsequent releases for its threatening demeanor and violent overtones. Of course, I'm talking about Cop Killer, which honestly, between you and me, is kind of an overrated song. Don't get me wrong, it's cool. And I do own both versions of the record, one with Cop Killer and one with Freedom of Speech, which was featured by Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys, saying parental advisory. And even though that song was awesome, all things being equal, I wish Cop Killer wasn't taken off the record, because I think people just would have forgotten all about it 6 months down the road. If some pencil pusher didn't point it out, or if it wasn't used as a tool or a flagship for censorship. You know what, it doesn't matter. Having said that, the rest of this album deals with heavy shit like racism and inequality and police brutality. There's even a song called Voodoo, which is a fun little tune about someone who went to New Orleans and then fucked around and found out. And then the thing is, all these things are relatable themes, plus the music is just bumping, man. Hats off to Ernie C. That cat can play some fucking guitar. And this record is sort of unique in the sense that there are little intros spoken by Ice-T in between each song, which is cool and brilliant if you think about it. Giving your song exposition can sometimes give some extra weight to the content, which is exactly what he did here. My favorite song on the record? It's gotta be KKK Bitch, and it's pretty much what you think it is. It's a song about Ice-T and Body Count crashing a Klan meeting while hiding underneath of white sheets and hoods, so he can basically fuck the Grand Wizard's daughter, basically right in front of him while they're holding their little hate rally. The payoff to the song, of course, is she winds up getting pregnant, much to the dismay of the shit stain of an old man that is her father. That's some funny shit right there. Anyways, I love this record, and if you're into hip-hop but you're on the fence about listening to rock and or metal, give this a try if you haven't already. You might be glad you did. I'll be glad you did, because this fucking thing is chock full of bangers. Next record. In at number 15, it's White Zombie, Las Exorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1. This was my first exposure to White Zombie. I actually heard Thunderkiss 65 on MTV back when they still did some music videos from time to time. Or maybe I saw it on Beavis and Butthead, I can't remember. But I do remember really digging that song and making it a point to find the album, which I did, and I was not disappointed, man. The opening track starts off real eerie, and that's kind of a theme here. It's supposed to be eerie and maybe a bit demonic. I think the whole point of White Zombie is to be different and fun and exotic, and for its day it was. Anyways, I love that record. I listened to it so much. The opening track, Welcome to Planet Motherfucker, great fucking song. Thunderkiss 65, Cosmic Monsters Inc., Spider Baby, all of which are kick-ass tunes, and they're mixed together with these movie samples, sort of like what Body Count did on their record, taking up some of the dead space between songs with some movie samples and things like that Rob Zombie was famous for doing. But my favorite song on the album has to be Black Sunshine, which features Iggy Pop doing a voice, and I love this voiceover, right? Gripping the wheel, his knuckles went white with desire. The wheels of his Mustang exploding on the highway like a slug from a .45. True death, 400 horsepower of maximum performance piercing the night. This is Black Sunshine. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, if you listen to that song and it doesn't get you pumped, I think that means you're clinically fucking dead. Anyways, I love Jay Younger's playing on this record. He really cooks. I have to say that Ivan DePrume and Sean Yseult really hold their own too. This record is just the right blend of pure adrenaline rock and roll mixed with samples of old horror movies and twisted lyrics. It's kind of like going to a rock concert in hell. And I think that was probably the vision. It's just a sublime record and a magnificent achievement in rock history. A lot of people say they like Astro Creep better, and that's not an unfair statement. A friend of mine recently said they preferred Astro Creep over Las Exorcisto, but I always thought Astro Creep was a bit on the techno side, maybe a bit too techno. I do love that record. I love the songs on it, don't get me wrong. But this is the flavor of Zombie I prefer. Rugged, raw, in-your-face, non-stop, balls to the wall, fucking rock. So, if you like your music on the tepid side, if you're into Air Supply and that kind of shit, stay away from this record. All the rest of you get to join me in universal love and praise for this record. Wonderful fucking record. Just incredible. Next up, in at number 14, it's Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine. Now, this is an interesting one because some people would call this nu metal. Some people would call this a rap metal record. Some people even call it alternative, but if you ask me, if you ask the band, they'll tell you they wanted those albums to be more like old funk and hip-hop records from their childhoods, only they wanted to do it in a sort of updated way. I mean, they called themselves the Renegades of Funk, for God's sakes. For my money, I think this is a great hip-hop record. Sure, Tom Morello's playing is, traditional rock and some metal parts, but listen to some of the other stuff that man is doing on the guitar. I mean, he made his guitar sound like a DJ scratching records on a turntable. Now that is impressive. And it gives the record a whole different vibe. I mean, he just used his guitar as an instrument for sound. Not for playing music, but for sound, right? Parts of that record really rock hard, and then it slips right back into something a little more mellow. And for the range and dynamics the music have, lyrically, this is some heavy shit. Like some of the albums before, you'll see a pattern developing here. As much as I like music that takes me away to a fantasy world, I love music that's gritty and rooted in reality that we all live in. And that's what this is. This stuff they did on this album really speaks for itself. Check out People of the Sun, Down Rodeo, Year of the Boomerang, Snake Charmer is fucking rocking. And of course my favorite song on the album, Bulls on Parade, which was actually a song that I had convinced my old cover band to learn. back in the day so we could play it, only for us to break up just days later, right? Bummer. And I was pretty good at the rap part too, but don't tell anybody that, right? Anyways, I have nothing but love for this record. I can't believe how some of old these records are, right? For those keeping score at home, yeah, this is 2 rap albums on my list and 2 country records on my list so far. We haven't even broken the top 10 yet, so I wonder if there's going to be any more surprises. Let's find out. In at Lucky 13, it's Painkiller by Judas Priest. I think the most notable thing about this Priest record is that it's certainly one of their heaviest, thanks to their new drummers, Scott Travis, I believe, who might have been too heavy-handed with the double bass drum kicks, but not for this dude. Hell no! I think this record best showcases Glenn Tipton and KK Downing's masterful twin guitar attack. I mean, this whole thing just screams metal. From the opening drum solo to the last breath of One Shot at Glory, this album fucking rocks and prowls and slithers like a snake all fucking night long. Here's a quick story. For those not in the know, I actually used to be a cheerleader in high school. Don't laugh, that's the truth. Let that sink in, I'll give you a minute. While you're digesting that information, hear this. While the basketball players, and I was a basketball cheerleader, right? While they were riding a cold, stinky, horrible, rickety old bus from the away games, I got to ride in the heated, comfortable, cushiony seat van with some of the smoking hot home ec teachers and all the rest of the cheerleaders. So I ask you, who was the real dummy? Anyway, to make a long story short, One Shot at Glory was the song I used for my backing track to my audition routine. The same routine that I choreographed and performed that got me the gig in the first place. And the funny thing is, I didn't even have the lowest score out of all the tryouts that day. I actually came in slightly above the middle of the pack. And I'm here to tell you, as a man, you've never experienced anything until you've experienced the icy cold stare of a 16-year-old girl that you beat for her spot on the cheerleading squad. Yeah, whoo-hoo. Boy, I got mean girled that day. But luckily, my superpower is I'm a dude, so I'm immune to that shit long term. You can't fuck with me there. Anyways, this album smokes fucking hard. If the title track doesn't get you on your ass, the rest of the album will. Hell Patrol, Nightcrawler is badass. Between the Hammer and the Anvil, I even like A Touch of Evil, which a lot of people don't like. I don't mind it. It's not like any of the other songs on the record, but I don't think it's terribly out of place. My favorite track on the record, absolutely the title track, Painkiller is smoking. But if there was a close second, it probably would be Between the Hammer and the Anvil. The other thing about this is that I listen to this record almost every time I travel someplace, especially on plane trips. I'll play this record along with another one that we'll talk about later. And between the two of them, I can usually make an entire flight listening back-to-back metal masterpieces uninterrupted, which makes me a happy camper, and far easier to deal with when I travel. So, great record, great sound, and really fucking heavy. Highly recommended. Next record. In at number 12, it's Eliminator by ZZ Top. Tres Hombre themselves, the little old band from Texas, makes the list. I know this probably makes me a bit of a basic bitch, but I don't care. I like what I like. Yes, this record is popular and it spawned huge hits for the band in a revival of sorts. They had an iconic look, which they made use of and got a lot of airplay on MTV because of it, I think. And what's more is they updated their sound with like bass synthesizers, and you know what? It worked. They were more commercially successful during the second run in the 80s than they ever were in the 70s. Did they sell out? Yes, they did. They sold out every arena they booked during that run. In my opinion, every single track on here is iconic, right? Give me all your lovin', sharp-dressed man. I got the 6. Give me your 9. Yeah. If I Could Only Flag Her Down are all great tracks. And of course, everyone knows Legs and Sharp-Dressed Man, but my favorite track on this record has got to be TV Dinners. It's such a weird song and an odd choice for a single, and yet it works. I like the teriyaki and the enchiladas too. I even like the chicken. The sauce is not too blue. Yeah, what a great song. I love it. One thing that I'll say about ZZ Top is that they weren't afraid to take risks. Having those long beards and dressing like whatever they fucking dress like. I don't know what that style is called. I don't know. Is it like Dirty White Boy Mariachi Band? I don't know. I digress. Anyway, they took these risks, like making use of these fuzzy guitars that look impossible to play, and it wasn't super influential or anything, and it didn't look hardcore, but it certainly set them apart from everybody else, which I think played into their advantage. I love this record. I hope you do too, because then we would have something in common. If you've never heard it and you're into 80s music, then what are you waiting for? Spin this thing and find out for yourself. Next record. Dropping in just under the top 10 at the ill-fated number 11 spot. It's Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil. This was my first exposure to Motley Crue when I was younger, and I was blown away by it. At the time, I was more into bands like Kiss and AC/DC and Black Sabbath, but Motley Crue was always on my radar. I remember copying this cassette from a friend of mine who let me borrow it. He actually introduced me to a lot of the music you'll see coming up here in my top 10. He was a cool motherfucker. He was a skateboarder kid, and I was not, but we bonded over really good music. And to this day, I wonder where he is. I'd like to meet up with him and see what he's spinning today. For a long time, it was the only Crue album I spun and owned until Dr. Feelgood came out, which I love that record too, by the way. Not as much as I love this one, or other records that make my top 20, which, by the way, was super hard for me to come up with. I think I already said this, but man, there are so many records I love. I wish I could tell you more honorable mentions, but gosh, maybe I'll save that for another video, AB's favorite obscure records of all time. I don't know. Anyways, back to Shout at the Devil. It starts out all post-apocalyptic with Nikki Sixx narrating something about how our cities have turned into slums. So come now, children of the beast, be strong and shout at the devil. And then that riff just kicks in and knocks your balls into outer fucking space, dude. What a kick-ass tune. And the rest of the album moves and smokes too. It's just as hot and energetic as you would expect a classic metal album to be. Looks to Kill, great tune. Helter Skelter, great Beatles cover. It kicks all kinds of ass and fits the band perfectly. Red Hot, Bastard, even 10 Seconds to Love are all great kick-ass rock tracks. But my favorite track on here, Knock 'Em Dead Kid. I have no idea what it is about that groove, but it's one of those songs that defined the entire genre for me. If there's something about the way that it was recorded and written, it's one of those songs that if it was written and recorded by any other band, it probably wouldn't even be on my radar. Only Motley Crue could have perfected such a raw sonic assault like this song. I think it's brutal and it's beautiful all at the same time. Also, this record is notable for having its album cover censored, because the conservative Christian community thought it was too evil, or that it promoted Satanism, which I think is silly on its face, but that's neither here nor there. I don't care what the album cover looks like in this case. That's not as important as what's inside. Luscious album, exquisite even. A early 80s hair metal masterpiece. Love this record. Next up, cracking the top 10, it's Pantera with Far Beyond Driven. I remember being totally stoked at the time of this record's release. I had been in the Navy for more than a year at this point, and I felt like I missed out on a lot of things between boot camp and going to A school, but this album was a blessing in disguise for me. By the time I was stationed on board the Tarawa, even though its home port was in San Diego, I was actually in dry dock at the Long Beach shipyards, which was a shithole where ships go to die. Long Beach was a city I had no real familiarity with, and I never really connected with that place on any level, especially since we were going to be leaving Long Beach eventually once we left dry dock. And I knew San Diego so much better. So on weekends when I wasn't on duty, I would just slip down to San Diego for the weekend and hit my favorite joints. I'd stay in a nice hotel room away from the dirty shipyards. I'd get cleaned up. I'd have a good meal, maybe go see a movie and see my friends down there, all that shit. And this was my first real time away from home, so this album represents a bit of growth for me. In the midst of all that going down, this record was released, and I remember being stoked enough to run to the record store back when they still had those and get this CD so I could check it out. And this was still in a time before MP3s, so if you wanted to check a record out, you pretty much had to go to the store and buy it, kids. I could either wait for one of my friends to get it, or I could take some initiative, and basically I chose the latter. And I'm super glad that I did, because this record smokes fucking hard. And I mean fucking hard. There are so many fucking bangers on here. I would listen to this record while I took the bus from Long Beach to San Diego for the weekend and back. It helped me escape and vent some of my early frustrations with life at that age, and I just never grew out of it. Dimebag was one of my guitar heroes, and if you listen to this record, you'll see why. From the opening number of Strength Beyond Strength to the devastating I'm Broken with Phil Anselmo screaming to the top of his lungs, to the fantastic Shedding Skin. All these songs are super fucking heavy. Becoming is a badass track that showcases Dime's unique perspective on this instrument. Good Friends and a Bottle of Pills is a crazy but badass tune. My favorite track on the record has to be the cover of Planet Caravan by Black Sabbath. It's just such an amazing juxtaposition against the rest of that record, and it really gives you a chance to breathe and reflect on the things you've just heard. This is also another instance of an album cover being changed. Originally, the band wanted an image of a giant drill going into someone's anus, but I think we can all agree that's a pretty gosh darn disgusting image. But the record label said no fucking way, as they should rightly have said. And the change wasn't necessarily censorship, I don't think, as much as it was just being rejected in poor taste by the label. But still, great record. It will always remind me of great times, San Diego, beautiful weather, beautiful women, and the joys of being single in the big city of San Diego. Next record. Clocking in at number 9, it's Countdown to Extinction by Megadeth. This is the other travel album that I spoke about earlier. Not the album I just spoke about, but this one. I don't listen to Far Beyond Driven when I travel these days. These days, this is my new travel album for all the same reasons that I listed above. This record just creates a wonderful selection of stories that I dig, man. They're dark and heavy, and the subject matter touches on themes that are far more adult than the other bands in the genre, save for a select few, I think. I fucking love this record. Top to bottom, front to back, I have loved this record since it first came out. Basically, this album was on repeat when I drove my old beat-up 1972 candy apple red Plymouth Satellite Sebring. That's right, fools. I was a cheerleading badass in high school, and you don't ever forget it. But no, back to the album. This whole thing smokes fucking hard, which I'm sure you'll see is becoming a repeating theme here. I say that about all these fucking records, but gosh darn it, I can't help it. I love this record. Every song on here is a gem. Every single song. A lot like Painkiller, this album opens up with a drum riff that foretells of the ownage that is about to be distributed. Skin of My Teeth is about as superb an opener as it gets. In fact, this song is tied for my favorite song on the album, along with Captive Honor. That's my second favorite, just slightly underneath Skin of My Teeth. Me and a friend of mine went to go see these guys when I lived in San Diego. And I gotta tell you, they were on fucking fire that night. And I'm so glad I got to see that lineup, especially with my good buddy back then. We were inseparable, and we loved the same kind of music, so when they came to town, I gladly took him as my plus one. I got to see what I felt was the prime lineup of Megadeth, which is Dave Mustaine, Marty Friedman, Nick Menza, and what is his name? Pedo Ellefson? Yeah, that's it, Pedo Ellefson. He doesn't get a first name. We won't mention him again. Say what you will, but Marty Friedman might be one of the best guitarists I ever saw live. He moved around like this little hairy muppet, that he went back and forth into places that most people don't have places, but he did it all with no effort, and he made it look impressively, and most impressively, he never missed a stick, not one note. God dang, he's super impressive, just a super impressive musician. And of course, Dave Mustaine, the godfather of it all, kicks all kinds of ass on tracks like Symphony of Destruction, This Was My Life, Psychotron, High Speed Dirt Kicks Ass, Sweating Bullets, Hello Me, Meet the Real Me. Such a great song, and you don't need to be a metalhead to enjoy it. Oh my god, such a brilliant and classic song. Great album. If you love metal, give it a whirl. You have nothing to lose. Literally nothing to lose. Next album. In at number 8, it's the first and only greatest hits album on this list. It's Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death by the Dead Kennedys. First of all, I love me some punk. Sex Pistols, the Ramones, Rancid, I love me some classic punk. And my favorite of all the punk bands, I think, is Dead Kennedys. Now, here's the deal. I love all of the Dead Kennedys original records. When I spin a Dead Kennedys record, I spin the whole fucking thing, right? Don't get it twisted. But this record holds a special place in my heart because this was my introduction to the band, right? This was one of those cassettes that I copied from my skateboard friend when I was younger. And the whole thing just blew my early teenage mind. This is the album that compelled me to check out their entire discography, which I did, and I still listen to this record all the time today. So of course this record's in my top 10 list. And I might have misspoke when I called this a greatest hits record because it is in the loosest sense of the word. Actually, it takes some of the singles hits and even some re-recorded versions of songs for some reason and gels them together here quite nicely. Now, some of the songs don't appear on any other record album, and those tracks are fucking bangers, like Pull My Strings. That's got to be one of the best songs on the fucking record. But I think a lot of people are put off by the Dead Kennedys because of their political leanings, and yeah, I mean, I kind of see what you're saying. They're anti-establishment, anti-authority, and anti-government, as am I. As my friend told me back when I copied their tape, he said, "These guys don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, man. They hate on both." Which I thought was an odd thing to say at the time, especially because we were both kids at the time, and neither one of us really gave a shit about politics, but that was well over 35 years ago that it happened. But neither here nor there. Police Truck, probably one of my favorite tracks, if not my favorite track on the record. It just punches you in the dick right off the bat, man. Sort of like some evil 60s surf rock tune about police brutality and how authority corrupts. But there's a lot of great stuff on here. Saturday Night Holocaust, I Fought the Law, Holiday in Cambodia, all great tunes. I don't understand why they re-recorded California Uber Alles. I'll just say it here. Not that I dislike this version. When I heard the original version a couple of years later, the one that was recorded for Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, I noticed how much faster and more energetic it was. I like both versions, but I do prefer the Fresh Fruit version a lot better. If you don't want to check out the whole record, at least check out Night of the Living Rednecks, which is a live recording gone awry when East Bay Ray's guitar string broke in the middle of a performance, and he had to take some time to replace it live on the spot, so the rest of the band improvises a bit. And they tell a story about how they went to Tolerant, Oregon, I believe. Just fantastic. Just like this whole record is fantastic. Highly, highly, highly recommended if you're into punk, or if you even want to think about checking some things like that out. This should be your gateway. I love this record. So fucking incredible. Next up, sliding into the number 7 spot, we have Nirvana, Nevermind. Now, this record is here because it is quite literally the soundtrack to my youth. As a teenager in high school, this record just stomped all over everything else I'd been listening to up to that point. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, I sheepishly liked some of the hair metal stuff, but I think I speak for everyone when I say that Nirvana totaled the competition. They were like a breath of fresh air. Kurt Cobain became this sort of reluctant megastar, with many calling him the voice of a generation, and this was the record that did it. And I drank the Kool-Aid, just like everyone else, you know? I feel like there isn't much I can say about this record either, because I feel like everybody knows everything about it already. What can I add to the discussion about this record that hasn't already been said? It's the greatest grunge album of all time. That's right, I said it. Suck it, Pearl Jam. This album is incredibly diverse, both musically and lyrically. Songs like Polly, and Something in the Way, nicely juxtaposed against songs like Stay Away and In Bloom. In fact, every song on here is a killer. When this record I used to spin this record all the time, and I mean all the fucking time, right? When I spin it today, I look at this record as being a more nostalgic pick than anything else. I still crank this thing every once in a while, but not as with much frequency as I used to, and that's sad, because after I go through my record collection, I thought to myself, man, I need to spin this more often, so I think I'm gonna start. Start again. The only thing I could talk about this album is that the album cover, being the subject of some controversy. Apparently, the little baby on the album cover decided he wanted to be a douchebag when he grew up, and he sued the band for, get this, child pornography. How fucking dumb is that shit? It's an ugly stain on an otherwise super noteworthy chapter in rock history. And I really think this is when the tide turned in modern music. But strongly recommend checking this out if you haven't already. And if you haven't, where the fuck have you been, Mars? Next record. Dropping it like it's hot in the number 6 position, it's Van Halen's self-titled debut album, Van Halen. Now, full disclosure, my dad was really into classic rock, which is what got me into guitar-driven bands in the first place. And back when I was a youngin', this was one of the records I found myself spinning more than most. And that trend continues to this day. I never outgrew my love for this record, because this was my gateway, right, into Van Halen. And every single song on this record smokes fucking hard. Van Halen just hit different. And I knew a lot of people would probably pick 1984 as their favorite record. And I love that record too, don't get me wrong. Every song on that record is a banger. But for me, no. This is where it's at. This was the first Van Halen record I heard out of that amazing LP collection. And guess what? It was love at first listen. David Lee Roth, Eddie and Alex Van Halen, Michael Anthony, real Van Halen, blew my little mind. And no offense to those of you who like the Sammy Hagar years, that dude is not my cup of tea. A lot of people hold 1984 and 5150 up as the glory years for Van Halen, and commercially that may be true. But this is where the band started, and this is where I started with Van Halen, so it holds special value to me. It's an album that I can always enjoy, and one that I'm always in the mood for. It really was a masterpiece in this day. Nobody played anything like Eddie, at least not to me. He was incredible, and he was one of the first guys who made me think that I could play guitar someday. He just made it so effortless. And guess what? Dreams come true. I'm not saying I play like Eddie, but and nobody plays like Eddie. I'm saying that dude was instrumental in making me want to play. And if you listen to this record, you'll see why. Running with the Devil, Jamie's Crying, Feel Your Love Tonight, Atomic Punk. I mean, his playing is so identifiable and so unique and good, it's not even funny. My favorite song on the record is Ice Cream Man. I remember I was dating this one girl at the time, and we were in upstate New York, and she was driving, and we were heading up. I think we were heading up to an apple orchard or something goofy like that. I don't know. I didn't want to be there. I was just there for the good stuff. And I remember she told me to pick the music, and so I put Van Halen 1 on, and she'd never heard it before. And so I was like, well, fuck, we're listening to this thing right now as we drive. And just as we got to the last song, I had her crank it up. I said, "You've never heard Ice Cream Man?" She said, "No, I've never heard anything on this record." So I cranked it up and I sang the whole song for her word from word in a very animated and entertaining way. And I was trying to do it to get her to crack up, which mission accomplished. And from that point on, Ice Cream Man was her favorite Van Halen track. And you might say she got a little ice cream that night. Great record, great lifelong memories of this record. There are too many lifetime highlights of mine that happened while listening to this record. This record gets high marks from yours truly. Every song on this record rules. Check it out. Next record. All right, it's top 5 time, and coming in at number 5, we have Back in Black by AC/DC. If there was any other good classic rock album that more epitomized what good times rock and roll should all be about, I don't know what it is. You tell me and we'll both know. I feel like this is another one of those records that's so popular, again, there isn't much I can add to it. Either you know it or you don't. And if you don't know it, why not? Where have you been, Mars? Maybe you're like Cousin Eddie out there living on a big hunk of government land in the desert and you don't have access to the rest of humanity, but you're somehow seeing this video without ever having heard AC/DC's Back in Black, right? Highly unlikely, but I'll go with it. I would tell you that this is one of the greatest records of all time. Not rock records, just records, period. And you know what? I would be right. My favorite song on the record is Have a Drink on Me, which they use for those Twisted Tea commercials. And funny enough, I never get sick of that song. Every time that commercial comes up, I want to rock, man. What a good fucking tune. This whole record is a masterpiece. Here's a funny story about my love for this record. I remember in high school art class, our art teacher wanted us to do this individual project of our choosing, and I wanted to skate a bit, wanted to take an easy W, so I decided to do a tie-dye, a black and white tie-dye. Well, my art teacher wasn't impressed with that. So anyway, I decided to up the ante a little bit. I did a black and white tie-dye, mostly black, a little bit of gray. It was a 3x5 banner, and I thought it looked awesome. And she said, put something else on it. So I literally hand-painted the AC/DC album cover letters on it and the Back in Black logo in the center of the flag. And I got a D- and a really cool flag that hung on my bedroom wall for the remainder of my years at home. That thing was badass. And it barely cost me a passing grade in a subject that, you know, look, it's fucking art class, right? It was iffy at best. But that's how much I love this record. When I was in a cover band years later, we covered You Shook Me at my insistence. I never get tired of that song. I never get tired of anything on this record. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Great record. Next album. Bringing it on home at number 4. It's Led Zeppelin II by the gods of rock themselves, Led Zeppelin. Did you see what I did there? Bringing it on home at number 4. Anyways, not only is this my favorite Led Zeppelin album, but yes, this is my favorite Led Zeppelin record. Every track smokes hard. Hard. This track listing looks more like a greatest hits compilation than any record, and many would be hard-pressed to disagree. I remember first discovering this record in its entirety right around the time I was discovering other bands like AC/DC and Van Halen. And let me tell you, Whole Lot of Love blew my ever loving mind. Like many of the rest of these albums here in the top 5, it was love at first listen. I instantly knew this was going to be one of my favorite bands of all time and one of my favorite records of all time. And 45 years later, here I am still talking about it on the YouTubes. Jimmy Page has a huge guitar influence on me. The things he did and was doing made all the sense in the world, as if these songs were just beamed into his head from outer space, and he was just the lucky conduit that got to disperse this joy to the world. Robert Plant howls like none other, and John Bonham plays like a fucking monster on here. But my favorite song on the record is the Lemon Song, where John Paul Jones gets his chance to shine on bass. I love that song so much, even though it's probably not totally in step with maybe today's modern culture. Guess what? I don't care. Fuck that shit. Other songs like Whole Lot of Love and What Is and What Should Never Be, Heartbreaker, Living Loving Maid comes off this record, Ramble On, and of course the badass Bring It On Home. This, more than any other Led Zeppelin record, screams who the band is and what they're all about, in my opinion. I think even more so than Led Zeppelin 4 or Zoso or whatever you want to call it. I like Led Zeppelin 4. It's, you know, Led Zeppelin 4 is iconic, and it came close to making this list, but no. This is the Zeppelin album by which I measure all others. Even into my teen years and into adulthood, I wore this cassette tape out of my car, and it was worth it to go back into the store the next day and buy it again on CD. I needed the excuse anyway, right? Perfect record, great everything, highest of recommendations. I don't know why you wouldn't listen to this record. Listen to this record. Next up, cracking the top 3, it's Metallica's metal masterpiece, Master of Puppets. What isn't to like about this record? I mean, it's nasty, it's hardcore, and in my opinion, far and away Metallica's best album. Far and away. This is another band that my skater friend introduced me to in junior high school, and he loaned me 2 tapes to copy that day. Both were Metallica. One was And Justice for All, and the other was Master of Puppets. Now, I listened to Justice because my friend told me that was their most recent record at the time. So while I copied both records, I only ever listened to Justice for All. Why? Don't know. All I can say in my defense was that Justice was such a badass record, I never wanted to give the other one a chance. And boy, was I wrong. By the time I got around to playing Master of Puppets a few months later, I kicked myself in the ass for sleeping on it so long. It's one of those songs or one of those albums rather, that's in rarefied air for me. The first time I ever heard this record, listening to it from beginning to end, I was just in awe of what I was hearing. It was like love at first listen. I loved it so much, I flipped the cassette tape over and started listening to the album again right after I got done listening to it the first time, which is, I think, the hallmark of any great record. So, how soon do you want to respin it? That's got to be a criteria, right? Everything on this record smokes fucking hard. Of course, the title track, Disposable Heroes, Orion, Damage Incorporated, Welcome Home. There just isn't a bad track on the record. I think tied for my favorite song on the record is Battery and Leper Messiah. I know the latter might be an odd track to have as my favorite favorite on the record, but I love the way the guitar part climbs a minor octave in the main riff, which I think sounds badass and gives the song some unique distinction over the rest of the tracks. 10 out of 10. 10 out of fucking 10. Perfect fucking record. I love this record so much, I don't think there's a bad track on the album. In fact, there's only one other metal album I think is slightly better than this one. But what is it? Will it be the next album? Let's find out. Coming in at number 2, and not my favorite metal album of all time, it's the Ace Frehley 78 solo record from Kiss. You guys had to know a Kiss record was going to make this list, and while this isn't technically a Kiss record per se, I can hear all the comments now, it has to be the best record with the Kiss logo on it that I have ever heard. And you know what? Kiss has this record on their official releases, so suck it, haters. No, anyways, don't suck it. Yeah, you guys have a point. Anyways, it's not about whether it's a Kiss record or not. It's just a fucking record. What can I say about it that I didn't already say about it in my other Kiss video? Which, if you haven't watched that, go back and watch that after you're done listening to this one. But my favorite rock and roll record of all time is the Ace Frehley solo record. Ace isn't metal, even though he dips his toe into some heavy shit on this record from time to time. I'm looking at you, Snowblind. I'm looking at you, Wiped Out in Ozone. Fractured Mirror even has heavy parts. But there are plenty of other things on this record that juxtapose those heavy songs nicely. Songs like Speed Back to My Baby, which is a bluesy, rocky, rolly type of song. The very trippy I'm in Need of Love. Or even the big hit, New York Groove. Look, there isn't a bad song on the record. I remember spinning this record as a kid. I had this tiny little kiddie record player, one of those deals that looked like a suitcase, and you lay it on its side, you plug it in, and soon you're playing records through this little speaker, this little onboard speaker. Well, this is one of those records my dad had in his collection that got borrowed all the time. I could not get enough of it. My tiny childhood brain could barely comprehend the awesomeness I was being exposed to, but I digress. The point I'm trying to make is, I still spin this record all the time to this very day. I usually listen to it while I'm shaving, while I'm in the shower. Usually both are being taken care of at the same time, and yes, I do shave, just not my beard. And not what you're thinking, people. Don't get dirty on me. No, but it's an album that I never outgrew, and I'm glad I never outgrew it because it kicks all kinds of ass even to this day. And while it hasn't necessarily aged poorly, some of the subject matter might be a bit on the adult side. So if you don't like songs about drinking and drugs and getting high, this record might not be for you. Also, there's not a lot of pussy chasing on this record, and I like that. Sometimes Kiss can veer off into the cock rock realm, and that can be a bit of a turnoff for some people, but if Kiss turns you off because they can be a bit sexist at times, this record will be a breath of fresh air. What I'm really saying here is, you don't have to like Kiss to like this record, which is really funny because this record is more Kiss-like than some Kiss records out there. But I digress. Go on, listen to it. I challenge you. You don't like Kiss? Fine. Give this record a spin and you might be surprised. 10 out of 10. Sheer perfection. And one that I'll never get tired of to the day I die. All the songs on here are tied for first place. Not a bad song on the album. Love at first listen. Love this record. Now, before I hit number 1, let's pay homage to some of the records that didn't make this list but deserve a shout out too. Like I said, I probably have 100 or more records that are all tied for first place in my mind, so while making this list was difficult in the sense that I had to write things down to just 20 records, the good news is I was spoiled for choice. So for those wondering why I didn't include this record or that album or whatever the case may be, for all you patient people out there who watch the whole video, here's a quick montage of 10 more great records that didn't make the cut, but on any given day, very well might. And the truth of the matter is, I could probably list 80 more records that deserve to be up here. Nazareth, Hair of the Dog, Cheap Trick, Live at Budokan, Kiss Alive, for God's sakes. Like I said, I love music, I love all kinds of music, even though I lean toward the heavier stuff. I like it all. So, who tops the list? Let's find out. Coming in at number 1, my favorite album of all time, the greatest metal record of all time, the dark and beautiful masterpiece known as Black Sabbath. Recorded in 1969 in just 12 hours, Black Sabbath's self-titled debut album was released in 1970 and instantly drew the ire of God-fearing communities everywhere with that haunting and downright scary opening track, with the rain falling and the lightning and the thunder and the faint church bell ringing in the background. And it just gives way to the band exploding with the Devil's Triad, singing an actual song about Satan. Of course kids are gonna love this. It's dripping with awesomeness, but it doesn't stop there. While lyrically they deal with some heavy and slightly supernatural shit, musically they were more akin to the blues. Sort of like Led Zeppelin, but where Page and Plant took things a little more mainstream, Sabbath did not. This is a record you should never listen to just individual tracks on. I mean, you can and that's fine, but for my money, you have to play this entire record to really get what the band was going for. Ozzy's piercing vocals, Tony Iommi's guitar wizardry, Geezer's thunderous bass lines and topical lyrics. They were all perfectly accented by Bill Ward's impeccable timing. This record was more or less recorded live, like I said, in 12 hours, which is still insane to think about to this day. Nowadays, bands labor over a release for months on a shot, and they still can't accomplish what this record did. And that should tell you everything you need to know about this record. There's only 7 songs on it. Well, 8 if you count Wicked World, which came out to the release in '96, but each of these songs are badass. A lot of Sabbath fans would pick Paranoid over this record, and while I like Paranoid, I think it's a close second to the King of Kings here. The title track is still haunting, but The Wizard is a nice bluesy tune that captures the essence of the band's early days when they were called Earth. And other songs like Behind the Wall of Sleep and NIB rule, Evil Woman rules, Sleeping Village and Warning, they all rule. Just like the other albums in the top 3, there's not a bad song on here. Fuck, top 3, top 5. There's not a bad song on any of these records. The entire record is just one great, big, dark, and lovely, trippy record, and it just brings warm feelings to my heart when I hear it. This This is the record that changed my entire perception of what heavy music should be and what it is and what it continues to be to this day. 10 out of 10. Perfect fucking record. And that's it. That's my top 20 albums of all time. Agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments. And if you ever wanted to jam with the old school, now you know how. Just pick up your favorite AV Top 20 record, crack open a cold one or two, and settle in for a hell of a ride. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time, whether it be another AV's Playground or a full-on episode of Double AD. We really should talk about that Superman movie. This is the old school saying, so long everybody.